Welcome, everyone. My name is Chris Cuban, and I'm the president of the St. Louis chapter of PRSA. And we want to welcome everyone from a number of different chapters, whether that's the Kansas City chapter, the Springfield chapter, the Nebraska chapter, the Southeast Wisconsin chapter, or wherever you have to be joining us from. So welcome for being here today. We appreciate it. And this is our 11th webinar. So we've done this for 11 weeks now to try and add a little value to PRSA members to have these free webinars. With no further ado, I'd like to introduce Karen Swim. And part of being part of PRSA is the camaraderie and friendship and relationships you build within PRSA. And I've known Karen for a number of years. She is actually kind of the mastermind behind an organization called the Solo PR Pros. And as she's telling me today, there's about 7,000 people in the Solo PR Pros group. So she's actually grown that and created that and grown it to 7,000 members. But she also owns a company called Words for Hire and does a tremendous job. She does webinars all over the place. So you might see her on another one of the groups that you're on. But Karen also serves as the National Board of Ethics and Professional Standards for PRSA National. So ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to Karen Swim. So take it away, Karen.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to be here, you guys. And I promise you, this is not going to be like a talking heads, typical kind of presentation thing. I love PRSA, and I love talking about ethics. Believe it or not, sometimes when I tell people that, they're like, it's so boring, but it really isn't. It's really exciting. And it's really exciting as a PR professional to know that that's such a critical part of our job, and that when we get it right, everything dominoes and flows from that. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day. Chris is so amazing. And I think it's great that you guys have really focused in on connecting and getting together and sharing knowledge and information for 11 whole weeks. Goodness knows this has been such a weird year for all of us. And we need one another, and it's a good time to double down on professional development. So I'm really happy to be part of this great trend that you guys have started. So let me share my screen with you all. I have a few slides. Don't worry, they're super short. And let me switch over to presenter view. Okay. Hopefully everybody, okay, there we go. So this is our topic today. And as we get started, Chris is going to put up a little polling question. The question is, what is ethics? So if you guys can take a second to answer that, that would be amazing. Well, I tell you what we're going to do today. So I have 3 simple goals today. Number 1 is to define ethics, because we all think we know what it means, but I want to make sure that we're all operating from the same definition. So I want to just explain it so that we all know, like, okay, this is ethics. And then I want to talk about why it matters, because really it is more than just doing the right thing. And then finally, I want us to walk away and understand not only why, but how we can be ethical on purpose, which is different than being, when you do the right thing, you sort of do it, but you're not giving a lot of thought of it. So we're going to talk about that. I'll give you guys a few more minutes to go through the polling questions. Chris, our answers.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, are answers coming in on the poll yet?
Absolutely. So morals is at 11%, doing the right thing is at 78%, and honesty is at 11%. So I also want to suggest if people have questions, please put those in the chat feature and we'll answer them as we go.
Perfect. So I went the wrong way. Honesty, doing the right thing, morals, those are all the right answers. So it was a little bit of a trick question, but it's much more than that. So when we think of ethics, we think of respect and honesty and integrity. And in fact, all of those things are part of the PRSA Code of Ethics. But ethics is actually, it's a discipline. So it's a field of ethics. And it is also sometimes referred to as moral philosophy. And it does involve systematizing. So systematizing those good things. So it's more than doing the right things. It's having a system, something that allows you to not only define what is ethical behavior, but something that allows you to track it and measure it, and to recommend the concepts of right and wrong behavior. So one of the keys in ethics, when for your organizations, or if you're solo like me and you're working with client organizations, the key is to first understand what the values are. What are the values of your company? And the reason that you want to understand values before you define your ethical framework is because ethics is going to really systematize and defend what your company values. What's important to you? What does it really mean to the public when they hear your brand name? What are the things that you talk about internally? So what is that mission, vision, and values? And then this adds a little bit of structure to that. So ethics really does matter. And I know that sometimes we think, well, we're professionals, and we approach our jobs and we're always going to make right decisions, and we're not going to break the law or do anything that would be bad behavior. But you know what? Ethics is much more than that. And the reason it matters is because it really does have a ripple effect. And we're going to talk about that. The bottom line in ethics is that, in our PRSA code, we talk about advocacy, honesty, expertise, independence, loyalty, fairness, free flow of information. And I think that the underlying theme to all of those things are trust. These are all things that allow our publics to trust us. If you're honest, people will trust you. If you show expertise, people will trust you. So ethics is the way that we get people to trust us. And so it's really important to have some rigor around ethical behavior. And so the reason that's important is because trust actually drives business. So one of the problems or challenges that I hear from PR professionals is that you have an understanding that ethics is really important, but how do you translate that into a business value? How do you communicate that to the C-suite that is like, yeah, we're going to do the right thing, but then they don't want to put the discipline that's needed to really have an efficient and effective and robust ethical program? Well, trust really does underlie commerce. If people cannot trust you, they will not buy from you. And in fact, there is a survey from Salesforce.com that showed that 93% of people will not buy from companies that they do not trust. That's a pretty high number. That means nearly everybody. But more than that, trust is going to impact, in ethics, it's going to impact your entire company from the basement to the boardroom. If you don't have ethics operating in your company, you are going to experience things like a lot of churn in your employees, because you're going to have a culture that rewards bad behavior or ignores bad behavior. And that means that people are dissatisfied, and you're going to have people that are going to have conflicts with their coworkers. So not only are you going to lose people, but you're going to have a hard time recruiting people to your company. And every company wants to get good talent, but you can't do that if you don't have a culture that supports that. You're also going to see it seep out externally. So we see lawsuits against companies, and usually when we see them publicly and we look at a few of the details, often it ties back to ethics. And we've seen that a lot publicly during this time of COVID. And so it's important because you protect and defend your company, and you drive business by having ethics in place. And so it really is a business problem, not a problem of, the public relations department. It's not just a problem for the legal compliance officer. It's a problem that we can solve together in organizations by having an ethical foundation. So there's the stat that I talked about. So let's talk about trust, because public relations professionals, we are the chief consciousness officers of organizations, or if we serve clients for clients. But there was a Gallup poll that asked people to rate their satisfaction and their trust with various industries. And the public relations industry ranked 22 out of 25. That really is heartbreaking, because if people don't trust us, then there's that trickle down effect. How do we start to rebuild that trust? That's the exciting part. Now we're getting into, how you really start to be ethical on purpose. It starts with you. So we've seen that people don't trust the public relations industry, which is terrible. And I feel like that's on us. We need to do a better job of showcasing how ethical we really are. We need to make sure that we are ethical, not only at work, but in life. So you see these two kind of faces. So you can't be one way at work and then make a different set of decisions outside of work. We can all talk about some of the recent, very public displays of people behaving badly and some of them losing their jobs as a result. That's a perfect example of why you need to have one set of operating principles that you function from for work and for home. And actually, there was a study that came out of Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management. And it showed that for employees who compartmentalized their personal and business lives, they were more likely to engage in bad behavior. And let that sit for just a moment, because I know that a lot of people, probably no one on this webinar, but maybe some of your colleagues, maybe people that you've worked with in the past, believe that work was a totally separate animal. And so you would have people doing things in their public lives that were really horrible. I'm thinking of, the recent tech CEO who probably made okay decisions at work. I don't know him, but then gets caught on tape behaving not only abusively toward, other customers, but I would say that it was really unethical. And the private and public selves cannot be different. So developing a strong ethics program starts with being ethical yourself. I'd love to hear, this is a set of stairs. What do you guys see when you see these stairs? And I'm going to go back so that I can see, love to see the chat. You guys can just start typing in the chat. What do you see when you see stairs? Chris, you guys are quiet.
No one chatting yet.
Okay. Well, let me tell you. So the sky's the limit. I love that. Thank you, Jeremy. Any other comments? So when I look at those stairs, what I see is that they go up and they go down. And the reason that that's really important in an ethics discussion is because an ethics program, again, has to not only be in place. So it's not only documented, it doesn't only exist, but it's lived. And it's lived from the basement to the boardroom. So it doesn't matter what floor you work on. It doesn't matter what position you do. When you have a strong ethical policy, it's enforced fairly and across the board. There's one set of rules. And what that means is that you can't have, I've seen this in some companies, that sort of wink and nod policy where you have a documented policy and then there's the real policy. So there is a really big difference between having an ethical program and really having an ethical program. And so, you have to really build ethics into the DNA of your company culture. It has to be interwoven into everything that you do. And you need to really think about, what are the things that are most important to us? So you want to document it, you want to make sure that it's enforceable, you want to monitor it, you want to challenge it. It's really important to think about the flags and the things that can come up so that you have answers proactively as to how to deal with that. And so the next step is, okay, so now you realize, you know what, maybe we do have kind of an ethics program in place, but, or maybe it's in a totally different department. So maybe, ethics has been farmed out to legal compliance, or maybe it's in human resources, and maybe it's, a couple of pages in the employee manual. But as a public relations professional, I believe that you should have an ethics plan that is as rigorous as your crisis communications plan. It's really that important. And so that means having some discipline around it. So, what you want to do is you want to have, first of all, clear ethical guidelines. And so, yes, they do need to be documented, and you want to communicate the criteria to everyone in the company. So this is more than, having a seminar once a quarter, or for some people maybe they do it one time when you onboard a employee and you never talk about ethics again. That's terrible. Or doing it when there is an ethical challenge. It means communicating the criteria clearly on an ongoing basis. Every person in your company, no matter what their job is, should be able to tell you the ethical policies of an organization, period. It should be non-negotiable, because if they don't know it, how can they live by it? You also want to commit to ethical behavior. And again, this commitment has to be across the board. So that means that it applies to executives, it applies to junior associates, it applies to administrative personnel, it applies to a warehouse worker. You have to commit. And committing means that you're going to enforce that policy. So you have to monitor compliance. So these are all roles and responsibilities that need to be assigned in the same way that you work through a crisis communication plan. One of the things that should also be a part of your ethical framework is really thinking through the what ifs. What if this happens? Again, just like a crisis plan, you're looking at scenarios that could challenge ethics. You probably already have some history of things that have happened in your client or at your organization in the past that you can draw from to help you to really build out this ethical framework. And so that helps you when you're thinking through what if, okay? Even when you're launching a campaign, it's a good idea to really do an ethics check. And one thing that people sort of have forgotten about, but in this environment that we're in today, where we've seen a lot of social justice issues come to the forefront, is really thinking through the ethics of fairness and equity. Does your campaign meet those challenges as well? Could it be challenged by a group of people? Could it be seen as being unfair? Could it be seen as being dishonest? Is it information that is partial information? These are all questions that we should be asking. And so, with COVID and all of the things that have happened this year, this is a great time, even if you have a very rigorous crisis plan and a very rigorous ethics policy, to take them out and review them again through a fresh lens and make sure that you really have addressed all of the issues that we faced this year. I know that people haven't done that because I also do crisis communications. And so I've had to help a lot of people through a lot of crises that could have been proactively prevented. So I don't know if you guys are seeing that. Again, feel free to pop into the chat. I am watching that. And also, if you have questions, please ask that. Does anybody have questions so far? Is this clear? Is this all stuff that you knew? Is there something else that you want more information on? Feel free to pop that in the chat. Okay, so one of the ways that you can start to build out this ethical plan, this ethical framework, is PRSA has fantastic ethics resources. Sorry, I can't talk today. There's some great resources there. And one of the resources is something that Jim Lukashecki has built that is so beautiful that you can print it out, and I promise you that it'll practically do the whole plan for you. So Jim takes a look at, how do you address ethical challenges when they occur? And he asked like this long series of questions, but a few things that he looks at are questions like, has all of the information been presented um, honestly and correctly? So, for example, if an employee raises an ethical challenge and says, well, I saw this employee do this, or this employee said this to a customer, you want to make sure that you have the full story before you take action. You really do, and this may not be your job, but it should be built into your plan. So whoever's role it is to investigate this ethical challenge, again, needs to investigate it completely, make sure that the information is accurate, it's honest, and it's complete, because you can't take action on it if you only have a part of the story. You really want to ask, did this ethical challenge happen because there's an institutional code of silence? I love that because I know that it happens in the best of worlds under the, when people have the best of intentions. Sometimes companies really have the best of intentions, but you may have managers that overlook things. You may have a sales director who overlooks a few things because they want their sales team to make quota and because they don't think it's that bad, quote unquote. And so if there's a code of silence, that's something that really needs to be addressed, because you're going to have things that come up that are questionable. So you need to be able to deal with this. You want to ask the question, how will future ethical information be disclosed? So this has happened now. So you want to deal with the present, but you also want to future proof your ethics program by thinking ahead and being proactive. With this information, how will this be disclosed in the future? Who will it be disclosed to? And then how quickly can we escalate this? Another important question to ask is there something that we are prepared to do as an organization that can put a stop to the behaviors that led to the ethical challenge? And again, that's solving the problem in the moment, but then making sure that it doesn't occur. So an ethical challenge is an opportunity to improve. I would not be afraid of it. You just need to deal with it. You need to learn from it. And then you need to build that learning into your ethics plan. Any questions on that so far? And so have you guys, I'm really interested to hear, especially during this time, and maybe things have calmed down because a lot of us are working remotely and not on site, but have you ever been presented with an ethical challenge and not quite been sure how to handle it? I'd love for you guys to share some of that. Chris, maybe, if somebody has a burning question, we can bring them on
Absolutely.
live,
I can
or
make them live so
yeah,
they can actually ask the question with
yeah,
their voice. So if you have something to say, you can just type your name in the chat feature, and I will click on you to make you live.
okay.
So a question that I have for everyone is Public Relations Society of America has an incredible document called the Code of Ethics. And it's something that I personally have all of my employees sign before they come to work for me. And it's something that's important. You want to talk a little bit about that and maybe ask how many people on this call have actually read that and have signed it themselves? Because it's really the basis of how we affect ourselves in this industry.
Has anybody, and don't, there's no judgment here because listen, to be honest, I get it. I know that we are all so busy doing our jobs that sometimes you forget about all of these other things, which is why we're talking about it today, hopefully to get you excited about ethics and how it can really help you in your job. Yes. Okay, Jeremy, great, because Jeremy earned his APR. So as part of the APR process, ethics is something that you need to know and you do need to sign the code. But, I like to make stuff practical. And it's not just about the accreditation, which is excellent, by the way, but it's really about equipping you and empowering you to do a better job. We really are the chief consciousness officers in, again, whether it's a client situation where we're independent and we have clients, or we run our own agency and we have clients, or you're in-house, it doesn't matter. It's really your job. And having an understanding of ethics and making sure that it's being adhered to in organizations is such a great protection against failure. It helps you to be successful in your campaigns, in your messaging, in your communications, because the things that underpin ethics are all things that companies strive to do. But now you're putting more than just words behind it. You're putting discipline behind it to ensure that these things actually happen. How many of you have been in situations, even during this pandemic, where there may have been challenges in how a company was treating its employees during this time of the pandemic? Maybe there were, questions about safety. Maybe there were questions about working conditions. I mean, there have been so many things that have come up. Well, when you have a strong ethics program in place, these are things that you could actually proactively look at. It doesn't matter that we've never had the situation happen. It's still something that you can anticipate in a way because you've addressed it in your ethics program. Agree. Yeah. So Jeremy is saying that there's not always information about how to run an ethical shop or how to deal with ethical issues. And I agree. We talk about it, and we talk about it in sort of a theoretical way, but we don't talk about it in a real practical way, which again is why I like comparing this to a crisis communication plan, because that's something that we all have in common. If you are, serving clients in-house, or you work in-house, or you're serving clients, one of the first things that I look at when I am engaging with a brand new client is, do they have a crisis communications plan? If they don't, then we develop one, because it should be a non-negotiable. Before every campaign, we're looking at all of the things that can go wrong. But imagine doing that when it comes to ethics. I have seen companies make horrible mistakes during this time period. Just, things that, and in fact, I know that all of us have, because if you spend 5 minutes on Twitter or any social media platform, you're confronted with live video of bad behaviors, and you think, oh my gosh, what was this company thinking? How could they have gotten it so wrong? But discipline helps you to avoid those errors. And I know that all of you have a vested interest in making sure that your organization succeed. No one wants to have your company on the news in a negative news story. No one wants to see your company's reputation tarnished. And I think most importantly, I truly believe that public relations professionals are really among the most caring, hardworking professions of anyone. I would say that we care. We want to get it right. We work overtime. We put in the hard work and the hustle. And sometimes it is a thankless job. Sometimes there may be days that you're like, barista, that sounds pretty good. And it's stressful, but we really are a profession that cares. We really want the right things to happen. And so this is a way that you can ensure that. It doesn't mean that nothing is ever going to go wrong, but it does mean that in the wake of something going wrong, you have the tools to address that. And so, can you guys think of any ethical issues that you've seen recently? You don't have to share details, doesn't have to be your company, but maybe it's something that someone shared with you, or something that you've read about that sort of gave you pause and you had to think it through.
So Karen, as people are thinking and are writing that into the chat feature, we do have a couple questions in the Q&A, and one of them is, can you provide the link to the ethics doc that you talked about so we can share it with everyone? I don't know
I
if you have that
absolutely
readily
can.
available. And Christine has a question. Do you have an outline for writing an ethics plan or a guide or program that you can share as well?
Yes, yes, and yes. And so a good starting point for your ethics plan is number one, you want to start with your company's values because that needs to be front and center because you're going to put rigor around what the company values. So that should be sort of the narrative, you know, these are our mission, vision, and values. So now how do you address that? What does that mean in terms of ethical behavior? What does that look like around your values? What's really important? What are the things that you need to protect and defend? And then a core part of your ethical framework is going to be looking at those scenarios just like you do in crisis planning. What could go wrong? What could be the challenges to this? What are the behaviors that could come up? What are the outside challenges that could come up that would force us into a position where we have to think about this? And as you plan out those scenarios, now you can begin to think about what do we need to put in place so that that doesn't happen. So here, sorry, I had to go and grab the link really quick because I wanted to make sure that I got it right in the new site. So in the chat, I have put the link to the ethics section on the PRSA website. There you're going to find the BEPS handbook. You're going to find some case studies that are really helpful. And I would say, you know, read those case studies because they can absolutely help you to think through scenarios that could happen in your own company.
And Karen, just so people know, and sorry to interrupt you here,
No, please
BEPS
do.
stands for Ethics and Professional Standards.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
those of us that don't talk ethics every single day, or it's
yeah.
not our
Sorry
jam.
about that. Yes. The Board of Ethics and Professional Standards, the National Board for PRSA is called BEPS, BEPS. And it is that way. You'll see BEPS handbook. That's what it's actually called. So BEPS. So thank you for reminding me of that. I, you know, pride myself on not using acronyms and then I went and did it anyway. So, so I have a question for all of you. Here's a good one. This actually happened. So if you, in your company, you, an executive was having an extramarital affair, is that a problem? And if you know about it, are you going to keep quiet because you feel like it's their personal business? Or are you going to bring it to someone's attention or address it in any way? And just feel free to type it in the chat.
Don't
Now I'm
have
gonna,
to at once.
yeah, depends on who's involved. Okay, so a lot of people probably feel like, you know what, that has nothing to do with the organization, their personal business. Let me add another layer. Suppose that same executive that's having an extramarital affair sent an email, a very sexually explicit email to the person that they're having an affair with from company email. And they accidentally CC'd you. Ethics violation or not? Are you still going to keep quiet about it? Are you going to pretend that you never saw the email? Are you going to address it? So Wendy's saying it can slip into executive misconduct at that point. So this is a real life scenario. And I brought it up because whether or not it was on company email, if you become aware of it, I think that we always have a duty to defend the reputations of our organizations. It's what we actually pledged to do. And so while a lot of us see it as personal business, there are a couple of questions that you need to ask. And again, this is where ethics and, you know, your vision and values of the company come into play. Are there specific policies on executive conduct? Every company usually has them. Is this explicitly called out? How is the use of email governed in your company? Is using it for personal purposes permissible? Or was that a violation as well? What if the person that they're having an affair with works for a very public company. And what if that email, it's happened to people. It happened to Jeff Bezos. What if that email was leaked and then suddenly you see it on the news? That has certainly happened. And so we want to plan for these things, even though it feels like someone else's personal business. But in my mind, when you bring it into the workplace, now it becomes everybody's problem. Everybody agree? Did the wrinkle make you think differently about it? Because even if it wasn't through work email, I think that these are the kinds of things like, well, what if? What if this had happened? And what if, this turns into worst case scenario where this got out? Would it hurt the company? Sometimes it could hurt you more depending on the type of company. I think, that public reaction to certain events, depending on the industry that you're in, if you're an entertainer who has an extramarital affair, people sort of are like, whatever. But if you are, an educator at an elementary school, maybe people will look a little bit differently. Or if you are, a rabbi, they're certainly going to look at you differently. So maybe it depends on the job and how the company perceives that. But for you, these are all the kinds of questions that you need to think through and ask.
Well, and opening up a can of worms here, I know Shira posted she works in politics. And so that should be addressed before it blows up into a big scandal.
I mean, I really agree. And so, here's the thing about being tasked with this responsibility. And public relations professionals are very unique in that we're tasked with protecting the public's and our organizations. So it's a dual role. We really have to think about both. And sometimes those hard conversations are very necessary. So if I got wind of something, it's a hard conversation to have, but I think that you just address it. You address it with the executive. You talk through it. And if it's something that needs to be escalated to the next level, then it's your job to do that. And again, that's not an easy role, but this is what we signed up for. And sometimes that means, sometimes I feel like I am the risk person. I'm always the person running around going, wait, this is the thing that can happen. Wait, nope, don't do that. And I'm really optimistic. So it's not always a comfortable role, but this is my job and I'm passionate about that. And I'm passionate about making sure that I do my part to protect. And so part of that protection means that sometimes we do address the very hard things. So I agree that, not just in politics, but in business and nonprofits, that if something comes up that could potentially be a problem, it's your job to now see this through and to potentially have those very difficult conversations so that you're prepared for it. And maybe it goes no further. Maybe it's just a conversation. And after that conversation, it's handled, in a private manner and it's handled discreetly, but the conversation should be had. And is Bridget joining us to share information, or is she sharing a question?
Yeah, I'm going to throw it to her in just a little bit. So keep on going, Karen.
All right, fantastic. So any other questions that you all have, or any challenges that you come up against that, you're like, I'm not quite sure how to handle this? How many of your companies or clients have an ethics program?
I'm so small, so we don't have one here.
Okay. Chris, doesn't matter. You need an ethics plan. Get an ethics plan, Chris. We don't, just values. Okay, so you know what, honestly, and again, no judgment here. Most companies don't. You'd be surprised to know that. But here's a statistic that you can take with you. So if you need to devote resources to get this done and you're coming up against pushback, I want you to be armed with information. Ethics drives business. It prevents your company from having lawsuits. It helps you to recruit and retain top talent. And it makes sure that people actually buy from you because they buy from people that they trust. But here's another thing. there are so many studies, and I'm happy to share these afterwards. There are so many studies that validate that when you have a strong, effective ethic program in your company, you have fewer ethical challenges. So just by doing the work of putting the plan together, you have fewer problems. In my mind, that's worth it, because when the problems happen, sometimes they can happen and it can spill over into your entire company. It can damage your reputation externally. And now you're having to repair, trust, and you're having to do a lot of things that you wouldn't have to do if you'd had a strong program in place that was actually enforced. And so, again, I know that we have to translate that into business value to the C-suite. So number one, money, bottom line, it's revenue. People are not going to buy from you. They're not going to use you if they don't trust your company. And number two, it's a protection, because when you don't have a strong ethics program in place, you can get sued. And three, if an ethics program is placed, you're less likely to have problems because you have a strong ethics program and you're being proactive about it. So it's definitely worth it. I see that Christine is saying that it's folded under the diversity and inclusion department. And you know what, you bring up such an important point, because Mark Dvorak and I addressed this earlier this month, I think it was, or maybe it was last month, I'm losing track of time. But diversity and inclusion is actually part of your ethics program. It's a key part of it. So we think of this, we seem to want to silo D&I, and sometimes we have a program where we check the boxes and it's not real. That's not okay for your D&I program, and it's not okay for ethics, but D&I is very much an ethics issue. So start to think and change your perspective around that as well, because that deals with fairness and honesty and integrity and all of the values that are part of the PRSA Code of Ethics. So that extends to making sure that you are not offending or marginalizing any community, but that everything that you do is equitable. And unfortunately, and I have clients like this too, that I had to have hard conversations with. That's not true everywhere. We have a lot of work to do, and that's okay. Let's do the work and let's make it happen. So any other comments? I want to share, if I can figure out where my slides are, two closing thoughts. One is, am I sharing my screen yet, Chris? Sorry.
Not yet.
Okay, there we go. Okay. So I love this quote from Paula Padine, and she is a member of the Board of Ethics and Professional Standards. She's just such a high quality professional. Paula was a whistleblower, and she says that as PR professionals, we have the capacity to build an organization's moral compass. But at the end of the day, if the executives we work with aren't interested in these ethics-driven goals, then it's our duty to speak up or take our experience and vision elsewhere. And the reason I love ending with that, because it really says it all about our profession. It's our job to not only be ethical, to put ethics programs in place, to help to monitor, but to stand up for it. And sometimes that may mean losing a client or losing our job, but that is the oath that we took as professionals. And it's so important. And then I wanted to put this slide up. Please feel free to screenshot it or take down information, because I'm always happy to answer questions or to help you to work through challenges. And so please feel free to reach out to me. My social media handles are pretty much at Karen Swim everywhere: LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, whatever your jam is, you can find me under my name. But I want to be accessible, because I want you guys to get this right. And I want you to know that not only me, but BEPS is also a resource for you so that if you have questions, you can always contact us. There's a contact form on the PRSA website, but I wanted to make myself personally available to you as well, so that I can help you and support you in your efforts to do the right thing and to build an ethical framework.
Well, thank you, Karen. We actually had Lori made a comment here that your boss drives the bus, and if you don't not like where it's going, go to somebody else's bus or drive your own bus. So a
I love
great
that.
there. And
I
as
love that.
everyone can tell, I mean, this is Karen's jam. As you told me the other day, this is what you love to do, and you can really tell that this is a passion for you, is talking about ethics. But I would like to throw it over to Bridget in Kansas City. If you'd like to say a couple words to close us out, Bridget. You're on mute, so we can't hear you.
Hi, Bridget.
I guess I need to unmute myself. Thank you, Karen. This was great. Thank you, Chris. This is perfect. What we all need to do. I know I've purposely chosen employers to work for in my career because of ethics. I want to, end the day that I did some good, didn't have to compromise my ethics personally and professionally, and work with a great group of people that share the same values. And so it truly is an important thing. And when your organization has a set value system and they have it on their website and framed on the walls and in all of their messaging, you live it. And so I thank you for the reminder, but this has been great.
Thank you, Bridget, and thank you, Chris. And, St. Louis, Kansas City, Midwestern region, I have a special place in my heart for Midwesterners because I really, part of the reason is that I feel like it just is such a great environment that really gets it when it comes to ethics and just hardworking values. And so you guys hold a special place in my heart. And the food's not bad either. And I'm technically in the Midwest too, sort of, kind of. I'm in Michigan. So we like to think of ourselves as the Midwest as well. So thank you for having me here today and allowing me to be part of this great program that you guys are offering to your members.
Well, thanks again, Karen. We really appreciate you being with us. And we do have some time left. So if anyone has a question or maybe a scenario they'd like to pose, I know that every so often those ethics violations or conflicts pop up from here to there. And it is challenging to decide how to deal with that. And does PRSA nationally have a conflict resolution component of their ethics?
Absolutely. So I want to be clear that the PRSA Code of Ethics is not punitive. It's inspirational and it's educational. And so we don't punish ethics violations that are brought to our attention. We want to counsel you through that and to help you. But yes, there is a conflict resolution process, and you can find that on the PRSA website as well. Visit the PRSA website. It's chock full of resources and information there. I have been guilty of not visiting it often enough. And sometimes I go on, I'm like, hey, everything changed. And I didn't even know that was there. So use your PRSA website because they put a lot of time and energy and effort into making it useful for you. Thoughts on ethics during COVID times. As I mentioned, I've done a lot of crisis work, and I have spent a lot of nights and weekends with clients or people bringing me on just as a crisis consultant because they did the wrong thing. During a global pandemic, as I mentioned, it's a great time to just check everything that you're doing and to make sure that you've covered all of the bases and that you have programs in place, because there have been so many lapses during this period as everyone has tried to scramble to adapt to our now normal. We've seen, there are some things that I don't agree with, but if you have policies around them and they're communicated, like changing pay scales for employees because they're working in a different area, if that's not communicated and you don't have transparency and insight into how you pay workers and you change the rules sort of midstream, I see that as an ethics violation. Protecting workers during this time, there's a whole new level that's been added to workplace safety. And quite frankly, employers have got to broaden their definition because they have, made so many jobs now remote as a necessity during, the shelter in place orders and these rolling lockdowns, that you have to make sure to keep employees safe in their home. And so that even extends to things like making sure that you're communicating to your employees how to have ergonomic workspaces, which people don't think about, because you're having employees that are having a lot of back and neck pain because yes, you've asked them to work at home. Yes, they're grateful for this salary, but now they've got these issues that were maybe exacerbated because they, are not sitting properly. They don't have a proper desk. They don't have the proper chairs, and you're not communicating that to them. I see that as a responsibility. And not to mention, again, all of the racial justice issues that have come to the forefront, but that have existed for so many years. And so I say use this time. This is an opportunity for us to take a fresh look at everything that we're doing in light of all of, the horrors that have been unleashed in this year. I mean, 2020 has been a Pandora's box of everything that could possibly happen has happened, global pandemic, racial unrest, killer locusts, Arctic on fire, you name it, it's happening. So yeah, I think that this is a great time, and I think we can use it well to really advance it. And I also think that when there are these challenges like now, you tend to have the ear of people that you wouldn't have when things are comfortable. So in times of discomfort, it's a little bit easier now to have these conversations that maybe people didn't think were as important 6 months ago. That was a great question, Wendy. Any other questions in the remaining moments?
Well,
You guys are so quiet. Does that mean that you guys all get this, or you just...
But we definitely appreciate you being with us today, Karen. I know you're very busy. You'll probably by the end of today have half a dozen Zoom calls, if not more. And I know you're on several boards, and just truly appreciate your time and being with us today. So
Thank
thanks
you.
again, everyone. And we'll see you hopefully next week on our Reaching Multicultural Audiences webinar. So that's going to be on the 23rd at 1 p.m. And then also on July 29th, we're going to do one screen-to-screen selling, how to engage new clients during COVID-19. So we hope you join us over the next couple of weeks. And thank you again for being with us today. Have a good one, everyone.